I've lived 1,000 lives. I've piloted 1,000 souls. I've killed and fought and died just for another role.
This is the Happy Jacks RPG podcast, a roundtable discussion that's a mix of friendship, humor, unbridled enthusiasm, and tabletop RPG topics sent in from around the world.
Just for another role.
Hello, and welcome to Season 31, Episode 7 of the Happy Jacks RPG podcast. My name is Kimmy,
Hi, I'm Adam.
And I'm Rose.
and I hope you can hear us because we just redid the whole setup in here so that amazing Rose can join us from very... In today's episode, Steve from SoCal brings up balancing world building consistency and yes-anding players' ideas. Thomas from Denmark asks about creating a good mystery and investigation story within an RPG. And Steffi in Scotland writes in about wants advice about giving TTRPG advice. So, if you'd like to contribute a question or topic to the show, you may email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. That's happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. And for our amazing indie designer of the month, we have Newer Rose, owner of Monkey's Paw Games. She's a Black, queer, trans, neurodivergent designer. Her work can be found at monkeyspawgames.com, spelled like you expect it to be, along with an amazing collection of indie games by other designers that she also sells there, which is great. This week, we're going to be featuring her game, Beecher's Bibles, which is a fantastic historical kind of setting for a game. It's about militant guerrilla abolitionists in 1850s Kansas. And it's actually based on true stories, and they're basically fighting against the pro-slavery forces that were there at the time. And one of the things that really caught my eye about this is there's so many, quote, historical games where you're like, involved in this, but and it just kind of like accepts like, okay, we're going to play this game in the South and there's slavery but we're just not going to engage with that. Right. And things like that, where it kind of just just kind of ignores the awkward or upsetting parts of history.
Convenient history.
Yes.
Convenient, yeah.
Yeah, because this is the game we want to play, so we're just going to ignore the parts of the history that make us uncomfortable and we don't want to engage with.
Right, yeah.
Which, if you're in a private home game, okay.
Do whatever you want.
That's a choice you can make. But I love that this, specifically, is, again, just, engages with it and, fights it. And it's like you are a militant guerrilla abolitionist. This is what you do.
Yes, which is beautiful because that is something that happened, and it's much more respecting of history to actually engage in that, and let's talk about the heroics of all the people who were fighting the whole time. Rather than pretending like, oh, it's just this thing that happened, and oh, too bad, and nobody really did anything.
Right.
The excuse of people of their time is absolute crap.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And there were people who were doing the right thing in that time. It's not just people looking back on it who are like, oh, that was so wrong. People at the time knew how fucking wrong it was.
Right. Yeah.
So I love that it engages with that. I also love because I'm a history nerd, where the title comes from. So Beecher's Bibles is there was a Henry W. Beecher was believed that the Sharp's rifle was really this is how you get equality, fighting things. Mm-hmm. So he was also fairly wealthy, so he got the abolitionists most of their weapons, and he would deliver them in big crates labeled as Bibles. So that way it would get past some of the checkpoints and stuff. So Beecher's Bibles is basically these are the guns they use to fight this battle, and it's just such a just a great title for it that captures it, and you're like, oh, you Beecher's Bibles, okay. And it's no, if you really know what it is, you're like,
yeah.
So
that is awesome.
Yeah, so I it's very exciting, and it's just a quick little game. You can find it on itch.io for $5. Definitely go check that out. And you can also find it on monkeyspawgames.com. So figure that all out. And
Excellent.
yeah, love New Rose games. And also, I think that's everything. I don't think we have any announcements for this week. No, amazing.
I don't have any
Okay,
announcements.
all right, just checking.
Wait, what's starting tomorrow? Or Sunday? Is
What's
it something
Sunday?
starting Sunday?
No, it's nothing starting Sunday.
It's not starting Sunday? Oh.
We're waiting till after the holidays to add a new game in. My game's running on Mondays, so I'm probably gonna try the One Ring Combat on Monday. If you want to check that out, that's gonna be exciting.
It's going to be
Exciting.
super fun.
Yeah, which is what we're doing right after this podcast, is me running combat a bunch of times for practice. So, surprise, Rose, welcome to the first episode. You're required to play the combat with me. All right.
Yeah. Being required to play games with Kimmy is like, yeah,
Eesh,
that's
pretty rough. Not
the
gonna lie.
worst. That
It's not like we've had, many emotional gaming experiences together already.
right.
I know. Just twist your arm. Okay. Mailbag number 1.
Hey, do you want me to read it?
Sure.
Okay.
Go for it. Oh, it's a long one. Let's split it up.
It's a long one? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I'll read for a while, and then when I
We'll
stop,
tag
catch
out,
my
yeah.
breath. Okay. Illustrious guides on our journey through collaborative storytelling. While we routinely mock the high Gygaxian, you cannot have a meaningful campaign if strict time records are not kept, I routinely find myself struggling with this, as the premise behind it is a good idea if greatly overwrought and awkwardly worded. The basic premise, to me, is that it is generally good to maintain logical consistency in our storytelling. On the other side of the spectrum, I've often heard Stork, and maybe others, extol, "Don't let facts get in the way of a good story," or something along those lines. Generally speaking, I try to be a fan of the players, embrace the rule of cool, and yes and as much as possible. That being said, I don't see any issue with this when it comes to things like the players ad-libbing details of a room, such as previous examples like I grab the fire extinguisher or I leap from the balcony and swing on the chandelier, despite the GM having never mentioned a fire extinguisher or chandelier. In these cases, the players are fleshing out the blank space in the world and making it their own, even if those details differ from what the GM had in mind originally. They don't change the logical consistency of the world or story. Where I think these ideals can come into conflict is in regards to investigations and fact-finding. While not all games are explicitly mystery games, I find that there's nearly always an aspect of mystery and investigation woven into the story, and maintaining logical consistency contributes to a satisfying payoff at the conclusion of the story. While it's interesting and fun to let players elaborate on what they think the world is or should be like, Strahd is plotting whatever Strahd is plotting, and the old gods are doing whatever they're doing in the masks of Nyarlathotep.
Close enough.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
Flawless. 10 out of 10.
Yay, I did it. If the players have a bunch of clues leading them to Shanghai, but make some assertions that lead them instead to Sevastopol, it might muddy the payoff if and when one of them realizes that now some of the plot doesn't make sense. Oh,
Okay.
somebody want to tag in?
Take off. Okay. Rose, why don't you take it?
Sure. Even in the world of pre-scripted movie/television/writing, we can think of examples where this kind of thing wasn't done well, in one direction or another, and grates on us. Number 1, think Kimmy's frustration over the horse episode on Lost. Not only was that plot line thrown away, but in later episodes, maybe the fact that there was a horse on the island could have been useful in solving some other challenges. Number 2. Or think of the world's greatest detective inserting a bunch of Deus Ex Machina-esque meta-knowledge to tie up a mystery that the reader had no way of knowing. Maybe there was a logical consistency, but the payoff suffered from a lack of sufficient knowledge. That's, basically Sherlock the show, from what I've heard. I only watched a few episodes. One of the consistent gripes with the end of the Mass Effect series was that the conclusion was too scripted and ignored basically all of the decision-making for which the series was well regarded. The end of Mass Effect 3 is you pick one of 3 or 4 options that are color-coded, and then you get the Endingtron 3000.
Yeah.
Um,
It's so frustrating. After all that, like like path and like to just like realize like, oh, it's a giant thread that all goes back into the same place. It's like,
Yeah, it's a game with so much permutation in like your relationships with characters or what characters are alive at the end and all this stuff that culminates in a bop it level complexity of ending.
Yes.
Do you bop it? Do you push it? Do you pull it? Do you flick it?
Yes.
And those are your options.
Yeah.
Number 4, as an example from gaming, Dan from Fear the Butte apparently routinely establishes a what's really happening document, which tracks ongoing events which the players may or may not ever come to fully understand. He doesn't constrain his players' actions, but when it comes to player assertions which would come in conflict with his really happening plotline, he'll correct those assertions. I have a problem with that.
Wait till the end. Wait till the end.
While I tend towards the last method, or something vaguely like it, unless the player's assertions are simple enough that I'm confident I can weave them into the coherent plotline on the fly without danger. It seems obvious to me that we want to walk a line along the spectrum and try to do a bit of both, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on how to do this and where you find yourself on this continuum. What examples can you think of which either worked well or proved challenging? You want to move on to the
wait,
next one?
there's a little bit, so we'll just finish the
Okay,
email.
yeah,
and then
I'll finish it out then. Okay, one example that comes to mind as having worked out well, but also been dangerous, was Stu's Mode of Sin example of the bar-owning mage. He was able to weave this player assertion into the plot in a fun and memorable way, but ran the risk of having to retcon something to explain why this powerful individual didn't do X, Y, or Z in response to the rest of the ongoing plot. Thanks as always for your time and efforts, Steve in SoCal. P.S. Write more emails, people. My last email took less than a week to be read instead of the customary 3 to 4 months of backlog.
Yes.
I wrote an email.
Yeah.
I was hoping that it wouldn't be on this episode. We'll see what happens next week.
It almost was like how much attention I can pay to which email I grab depends on how good a mood my toddler is while I'm like grabbing them while I'm trying to feed her dinner like before the show.
Just change the from line and it's all fine.
I almost grabbed. I like.
Someone else had my same idea.
Yeah,
Who knew?
that'd be
right?
great.
It's schmoes from Alabama.
No problem.
Yep.
All right. So going back, what examples can you think of which either worked well or proved challenging? So I feel like, I'm going to jump right in now because I'm balancing this in a way that I'm not used to with my the One Ring campaign that I'm doing right now. I know Tolkien really, really well, but I want to make sure that, especially with one of my players knowing Tolkien as well or better than me, I wanted to make sure that like I'm still within like the parameters. So I have a bunch of notes, which I'm not really used to, and I forgot to number them on session 1. That was great. It's like 15 pages of notes that I have. Like one is all my, my Elvish pronunciations. One is like major characters. One is like my NPCs that I've made. And they're kind of like in this fan. And then like at one point had grabbed some because I couldn't read it. And it's just like a mess. But anyway, I digress. I apologize for people who want to give us a 2-star review for not staying on topic.
Again, I'm sorry for the review, but it was honest.
It was anyway, yeah. So it's fine. Anyway, so this is something I'm trying to balance right now because a lot of times I play in worlds that I've completely created with my players, which gives you a lot more freedom because you literally can be like, oh, this exists. Oh, this doesn't exist. And when you're playing in something that is so known, you have to balance that a little bit better. So there's choices I'm making with that. Like, hey, we're going to Bree, but we're not hanging out in Bree a lot because we're going to need the prancing pony later. I don't want my players to burn it down. That's the joke I keep making. But if we burn that down, there's a lot of problems later. So you kind of stay, and we've talked about that before, especially with stuff in like Star Wars and things like that. So it's an interesting balance that I haven't had to pay quite as close attention to before.
Yeah.
I've run games in like DC universe and stuff like that, but most of the time they're one shots. So it's like, buildings get destroyed in comic books a lot anyway, so it's not quite as precious.
Yeah.
So right now what I'm doing is like I said, I have my notes for things in the world that I need to be reminded of and things that are immovable. They're on one sheet, and that's like the canon characters from the story, canon places in the story,
Uh-huh.
and that sort of thing. And then I have another sheet which is my NPCs, which are linked to canon, but like are vaguely mentioned in some notes. And I picked things specifically that I could then futz with
Yeah.
without breaking things. So then I have like the malleable things that I can play with more on a different sheet. So that's how I keep that straight with my brain. And as far as the plot, right now, I don't have, like, I feel like at some point we will start having those things, and I'll either put part of the plot on the malleable or the kind of canon sheets. So that's how I'm balancing that at the moment right now.
Yeah. So I'm gonna get kind of meta with this, but I know, right? But well, there are two different things. One I want to say is that I have a lot of struggle with this aspect when I try to run from modules. That's where I mostly run into the problems, and I love the idea of modules, and it's great because somebody's done all of this prep work for you. But at the same time, a lot of it is very connected to different parts in the future story, and not knowing and even though I've read the entire module, I don't remember it when things are happening, and I don't want to interrupt the game that's happening to look up like, oh wait, does this mean something? Especially if there's like stumbling across a place where I know there's a clue that's supposed to be here, and I kind of vaguely remember it relates to the chickens being poisoned, but I don't. I don't remember what the actual clue is. I just know it's supposed to happen when they're in this cave, and referring specifically to an L5R module. But and so I'm like, okay, so I make up what I think this clue is, and then I later find out like, oh well, that leads them completely away from the person who is supposed to be the major antagonist. Oh well, I guess this other person is now the major antagonist. And so anyway, it's a difficulty that I have with modules. I love those L5R modules, by the way. They're beautifully written. They're really cool, but I was like, I can't keep running this game like this. I do not, yeah. But I am a very improvisational, off-the-cuff GM. And so I don't end up in this scenario a lot, because my assumptions when I go into planning the game is that everything that I have kind of pre-thought out is likely to get changed when we start collaborating. And and part of this is as a theater professional, I have a lot of, as a theater designer, I have a lot of experience with going in and saying, well, here's my ideas about what I think the look of the show should be.
Mm-hmm.
And then I start talking to the director or the actor or the set designer, and I'm like, oh, actually, yeah, okay, let's move this direction instead.
Yeah.
So my entire brain, all of my training is geared to being able to sort of shift like that, and that's how I approach games that I run as well. So like I'll plan out this whole, like, here's the whole setting, and I know all of these different NPCs that are there. I have kind of what I think is the basics of the history of this place, or what's going on that has happened already that has set this in motion. But a lot of that gets revised after I do session 0 and find out what the characters want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, well, actually, I want to be the child of the king. And I'm like, oh, okay. And a character, an NPC child of the king that I had planned, like, gets changed to something else,
Mm-hmm.
or I think, oh, these plot points are part of what was going on behind the scenes of that character's backstory. And so basically that's my default method of approaching a story.
Yeah.
So I don't usually run into this point of where I'm like, okay, well, I had all this stuff planned out, and now they've done something completely different, because I'm not thinking past how I'm going to start the next session.
Mm-hmm.
And I had I've been running a game just recently that's about to wrap up, and there were 2 characters that I set up as major NPCs who were supposed to die while the characters were off on another part of the mystery, and their death was supposed to be a catalyst for things. Well,
That's always great. Like,
right?
They're gonna die. It'll be great.
Sounds great. They did such cool stuff. Now both NPCs are fully alive and fine, and and the whole scenario has changed. And
Yeah, you can never count on NPCs dying or surviving.
Yeah, if you want the NPCs to die, the characters will save them. If you don't want them to die, the characters will kill them instantly. One way or
The
another.
players have altered the plan. Pray they do not alter it again.
Right? Yeah. And so I think part of my strength as a GM is I do it. I go in planning that they will alter the story, and so I never plan more than some sort of skeletal structure that I can build on.
Yeah. Rose, did you have stuff?
I do have thoughts. So to roll back to like the very beginning of the email, that classic off-quoted line of Gygaxian of in fact, I think they actually rephrased it because it's a meaningful campaign cannot be had if strict time records are not kept. It's very passive. So I actually found a really interesting video talking about that line, which is that their explanation for why that line is in there and why that was important is because the original D&D groups were like 20 people.
Oh.
Any number of whom played at the same time.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
So they would play their D&D group was a huge pool of people, and then a random number would show up and actually play on any given game night. No.
Another horror story.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the reason keeping the timing consistent was because not only was the player pool so large that if you weren't kind of keeping things going at a steady pace, people would get left really far behind. But also the concept that the first D&D games were shared universe games. Like Greyhawk and the Forgotten Realms and all of that stuff had multiple GMs running multiple games in the same game world at the same time, which would then interlap. There was no instanced game. It was everything everywhere all at once.
Yeah.
And so that's why strict time records were important. The other thing was that they also were doing, it was a very unused rule, which was have time in the game universe pass at the same time it passes in the real world. So if you end a session on Friday and you don't play until next Friday, a week will have passed in universe when you come back. And so you would have downtime activities and you would have all this stuff. So not only that, you had the whole thing of it being much more of a game and much more based on like wargaming, where the goal was like to finish the dungeon and get back to town by the end of the session, because if you didn't, you were stuck in that dungeon for a week. So out of context, the quote is absolutely terrible. Like, it is very much like, this is the one true way to run a game. But for the reality of the way those games were being played at the time, it was a very useful tip, because they were running and playing games in a completely different way than we play them today. Also because the pool of people playing D&D while it was being written was like 100 people.
Right.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to balance that when you have, even if with 20 people playing a game, if you are a pool of 100 people and they all kind of know the world.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So on top of that, so to roll it back around to how you handle what's really going on in the game. That last one of the log of what's really happening. Why would you do it that way? Like, whose entertainment is that serving?
Right.
Because when you do that, one person knows the real story, really knows what's going on, and gets to enjoy the full picture of things.
Yeah.
Versus the other 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 other people at the table. That to me, I think, gets into the why are you GMing when you could write a book territory.
That Yeah.
And the other thing is like modules and stuff like that, or like when there is like a script to what's happening in the world, when there is a one correct thing that is happening,
Mm-hmm.
there's a reason both actors in a scene have the script.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because otherwise the other half of the group has no idea what's going on,
Yeah.
and just has to kind of muddle through it. When you're getting things that tightly scripted, sorry, go ahead, Kim.
No, you're good. Keep going.
Yeah.
So that to me, like, makes me wonder, like, what are your priorities there? Because
Right.
at that point, your players are going to be wrong more often than they're right.
Yeah.
And that's a really frustrating place to be. I've been there. I played in like a 3-year-long D&D campaign,
Mm-hmm.
and incredibly creative, dedicated, wonderful GM created this massive world that we never had a freaking clue what was happening.
Yeah,
Ah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like my character had this massive, really cool backstory that was hidden behind like DC 30 Arcana checks.
Oh.
There were many things that made me go, why would you do it that way?
Yeah.
But the concept of information is for the GM to have and the players to maybe find out
Mm-hmm.
is backwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It should be
Oh, sorry.
the players should get as much of the story as possible without it just being like telling them exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think that your like kind of reference to actors of the script is important, because even as a more improv style like GM, like if you look at like actual improv, like there are very set rules to improv, especially if you're in something like the Groundlings or Second City or something where they're doing live improv with an audience.
Mhm.
Like you have the first person, you've got the second person, and however, depending on what type of improv they're doing in that scene, or what type of scene it is, or how many people there is one person who sets the scene. And you will see that. It's very subtle sometimes if you don't know what you're looking for. They'll walk in and they'll be like, Grandma, I can't believe that you are back from your cruise already. What's with that hat? Like, and they
Yeah.
basically have like laid out the scene. They've done the GM's job of, I've told you who your character is. I've told you who I am. I've told you what our setting is. And I've told you like the focal point of the scene, which is going to be this weird hat.
Right.
So like, even with the most unplanned improv thing you can have, which is literal acting improv on a blank stage, they have information that is then like the world you're in.
Yeah.
You don't then break it. Like people will add to it, but you can't then be like, wait, I'm not your grandma. I mean, people do that. That's how you tell, you're in like the bad, like low improv who's like, this is the student improv.
Yeah.
Because they'll be like, I'm not your grandma, I'm your girlfriend. And you're just like, really, dude? Come on.
Yeah.
Just yes and me. Because that's what yes and means.
Yes.
Yes and does not mean yes anding everything somebody says. Yes and is actually the second person in an improv scene accepting the premise that has been presented and then adding to it. So you're basically saying, yes, I am your grandma in the weird hat that I got on my cruise. And I brought you a puppy.
Meet your new granddad.
Yeah.
He's 29.
There you go.
Right, yeah.
And this is, Vlad. This is your Vlad, your new grandfather. He has 9 abs because Adam's here.
Yes.
So that's really what yes and means.
Right.
And we've talked about that a couple times before. People take the idea of yes and as yes, I have to accept things from my players. It's actually the players yesing the world and adding their own flavor
Right.
to it.
Yeah.
It's a two-way street.
Yeah, 100%.
To me, there's a very and this is where I wanted to get meta on this. There's a very fundamental precept that I think a lot of people in RPGs hold, which is that surprise about the story is a one-directional exchange. That the players are supposed to be surprised at what happens, and the GM is not supposed to be surprised at what happens. The GM is supposed to deliver surprise to the players and never vice versa. And part of why I do improvisational games more, or the ones that lead or improvisation. I improvisationally GM games.
Improvise?
Improvisations. Um, but one of the reasons I do improvisational GMing of even heavily mechanical systems is because I am willing to be surprised by what my players offer.
Yeah.
And so I completely agree with you, Rose, about the idea of like you're having this like log of here's what's really going on. It's like you're denying yourself the ability to have any kind of enjoyment from your players, and all you're doing is setting up a rigid structure that's going to break as soon as one of your players wants to add something to it.
Yeah.
And why would you do that to yourself? And again, I've talked about this before on the game, and this is one of those hills that I die on, is that the GM is a player too. And you're supposed to also have fun,
Yep.
and you're supposed to also feel excited about what's happening. And I think most of you, I think, will have a lot more fun if you allow yourself to be surprised by what the players offer. And so if you're, I totally understand the idea of like theorizing out these notes, right? And you're making these logs of like, here's what's happening behind the scenes, assuming that everything I know so far is true. But then you should treat that as like, this is just one of the theories, and it is no more valid than whatever crazy random idea one of the players is thinking up. And you're going to have a lot more fun when the player comes in and says, oh, actually, no, that's, here's this whole thing that I'm doing. And you're like, well, that upends everything I planned. Then now you're surprised and you get to have fun trying to roll with that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you can't prep. It doesn't mean that you can't have some ideas about how things are going to go. But I think if more GMs allow themselves to be surprised by the players' additions to the plot, they will find it's a lot more fun for them.
Yeah.
So
I think it's important to note though, like it's okay to say no sometimes.
Yeah.
Like for your example with like the player who wanted to be the king's child.
Yeah.
Like you went with it. That's great. That's a totally valid thing. But if you want to, as a GM, if you want to be like, oh, I have a thing planned for this, and I think would be good. Like what did you want from the storyline?
Yeah.
Like why do you want to be the king's child? What do you
Right.
want to get out of that? Maybe we can have you be the cousin who's not in line for the throne, and maybe there's some bitterness there about it. Maybe your parent was supposed to, but they got passed over for some reason.
Right.
You can add a lot of richness there by saying, no, but what do you want?
Yeah. And it's okay to say, hey, for the story that I've built, for the world that I've built for you to play in, I need this to be this way. But let's figure out how we can put you into this.
Yeah. Rose had something to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this kind of gets into kind of some like gaming values of mine. So like when I've met a lot of people who come to GMing through D&D and think that if they're going to make a homebrew world, they have to build up the entire world from creation myth to present day. And
just say my name, Rose. It's fine. Just say it.
Which, if you want to do, is fine. That is not mandatory, and that is not necessary, but it is allowed. But what I think is really important is, and what I think that gets again into the write a book territory. Like this is something you are doing for your own creative fulfillment and not for the enjoyment of the people at the table. It might be the enjoyment of one person at the table, being yourself, but it is not necessarily that effort, that time that involved creative energy is not necessarily translating to enjoyment for everyone else. And that's why I think, like, for me, one of my core tenets of GMing is that things only become concrete when they're in front of the players.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like once it is in front of the player, then it is fact. Anything else, you can have it real real firm outline and pencil. Like it is in there really good. But if you need to change it, you can. You don't have to have it nailed down. And so when something gets thrown at you where a player does something unexpected, or if someone, for example, comes up with a better idea than you had, you can erase that and put in the cooler, more fun, more enjoyable thing.
Yeah.
Case in point, I was running a Masks game that Adam was in, and one of the players, Jim, said, "Hey, this old mentor figure, can that be my character from the future?" And I went, "Absolutely. That is so much better than I thought. That is one of the coolest ideas. I never would have thought to do that.
Yeah.
That is so much fun."
Yeah.
Like, I'd already made him this cantankerous old bastard, and the idea that that is our nerdy teenager in like 60 years is so funny.
And we were gagged. We had no idea until Rose and Jim. Jim.
Yeah, it was Jim.
Until Rose and Jim revealed it, and Jim just got this grin on his face, and because he's a player that doesn't really he's not very rambunctious, and the rest of us were, and so so a lot of times he was a more quiet presence, but boy, when he had something good underneath it, it was.
I could spend this next couple minutes, and you know what? I will, because I'm on the show and you all can't stop me. I see you reaching for the mute button. Don't do it. Jim is phenomenal.
Yeah.
He's in the chat right now, so I'm doing this specifically to embarrass him. But he is one of those players that would sit quietly and then hit you with the greatest jokes you've ever heard.
Oh my God.
Like, the players were trying to find some villains, and so they're like, is there a social media app for that? And he was like, yeah, you could check Craigslist, you could check Fiend Book, you could check and just had 6 different jokes. And we're just like, I just sat there and went, we mentioned this 30 seconds ago.
Yeah.
And you came up with all of these jokes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Just brain explode.
Yeah.
He would take the entire session just to set up the perfect pun. And then hit us with it, and we're like, "You have been planning
to his
this."
Detriment sometimes,
right? Yeah. Oh my God. But yeah,
I still don't know what one of his character concepts was, because it was a giant shaggy dog story.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So anyways, that is me talking about my home games and gushing about one of my players. But that moment of a player coming up with a cooler concept than you can come up with.
Yeah.
You won't have, if you have a document saying this is what's really going on. I think it's important to have an idea. I think it's especially important that NPCs have consistent internal motivations, and that they have plans and wants and desires and personalities. But those things are all in the background. None of those have shown up on camera yet. And those things can shift around and move and change to whatever situation you've got. So if the villain was going to be one thing, but it turns out that one of your characters has a backstory that tags into another thing, it can change. Set in stone. Yeah. Once your players see it, then you should probably try to be consistent about it. But until that moment, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah. It's cool though, the one time I do generally have these documents where I'm tracking things are when there's NPC timed things that the players either have engaged with a little bit or haven't. I do this in Masks a lot, where there's villains who are TikTok, there's a bombs or not. No, that's too close. But they're planning a thing, and then the players.
There's a maiden on the train tracks.
Yeah, exactly, that sort of thing, where you have something that is working in the background, and you can still adapt it or change it. But sometimes, especially with investigation stuff like that, sometimes it's nice to have the players get some things wrong.
Right. Yeah.
So it's you went to it's empty, and suddenly there's an explosion across town, and it's don't do that all the time, because that gets very frustrating for players. That's no fun. And don't do it if it's the big climactic ending. That's no fun.
Yeah.
But I've been rewatching My Hero Academia this week, because that's what I'm doing is for 6 hours a day. Anyway, And like there are great points in the story where it's like, okay, like they split up and half the heroes go here and half the heroes go here. And then like, oh, it turns out that all the bad guys were in one place, and the other group has to like, now that, you know, the explosions happen on the other side of town and they're at this empty warehouse, now they have that exciting, let's get it over there as fast as we can to try and help and things like that. So make it a catalyst for things to happen. Don't just make it like a loser moment where you're like, oh, too bad you guessed wrong. I guess you get to sit in an empty warehouse while something exciting happens. Like, give them something to do. Have that be oh no, this is happening now. And you're going to have to frantically, you know, make it a catalyst for action rather than just a dead end.
Yeah, if they're going to screw around and go to the beach, there should be some consequences.
Exactly.
Davi brought this up in the chat, and then it's something that I've learned from PBTA games is that idea of like timelines or as Monster of the Week, which I think is one of the best guides for how to run a game in a structured but improvisational way is the Monster of the Week book. But basically you have a sort of like, well, here's sort of the countdown. Here's the order of events, the main events that are going to happen if the players don't do anything to address it. And obviously the players are going to, but it does kind of give you some structure. So when, you know, and this is what happened when we were doing Interpol X, and I had this list. Here's what the bad guys are going to do, and you know, and at a certain point, the Interpol X team captures one of the main bad guys, and I'm like, okay, now I have to, but it gives me a spot to pivot from because I can go back and look at that timeline. Like, okay, well, what would the others do to compensate for the fact that they've now lost this key player? Yeah, and it gives you a great way to work their actions back into the game. So you don't have that thing like the Mass Effect ending Tron, you know, which I think is a problem that a lot of MMOs suffer from is like, look at all these choices you have, but ultimately it goes back into the exact same world, the exact same thing.
Just, I think video games in general have that. Because because a video game can't improvise. Right, yeah. It has to be pre-programmed. That's one of the cool things about playing tabletop RPGs. Yeah. Despite, like, okay, a lot of people get frustrated. Well, you have to sit and do all the math. At least a video game does that for you. Yeah, but a video game isn't going to change the story to be, like customized for you and your friends as you make cool decisions. Yeah. Like, no matter what choices you make in a video game, like, a bunch of people out there have made the exact same choices in the exact same order. And more than that have ended up with the same ending. And it's just like, meh. Yeah, yeah.
I just sum up this email by saying your games are going to be a lot more fun for you and everybody else around you if you approach them more like Clue than like, you know, than like Mass Effect.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Very good.
Okay, I did have like two last things. I know we've been on this email for a really long time. That's okay. But the more strenuous, like there is a right answer to things, I think happens a bit more in pre-established settings. Yes. So and pre-established tone. Yeah. So if you're playing like a cyberpunk game, having everyone win and beat the corporations probably kind of breaks the setting. So trying to be consistent there. But that's why it's really important to have those conversations to make sure everyone is on the same page for the game's tone. Yeah. That's one of the problems that I had with D&D because the tone is literally all over the place.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
Anyways.
All right. Mailbag number 2. Dear Kimmy and the Jackers, first of all, thank you for putting the time and effort into the Happy Jacks podcast. After years of listening, you all feel like friends, and this is how I can read tonight. I'm sorry. And
do you want me to take over?
I'm one sentence in. I can do it.
You got this.
And this is great how the podcast evolves and renews itself over the years. Have a drink. Skull.
Cheers.
Having heard of the awe-inspiring tale of Jan Engel's Game of 10 Candles, Season 31, Episode 3, I had to Google MidgardCon and was so happy to see that it's held a bit south of Oslo, making it very doable to make the trip from Denmark. I am absolutely tempted to attend next year and was relieved it wasn't held in a remote part of northern Norway, which would make it far, far away. Since Kimmy in the same episode asked for some mails, I wanted to share my own latest con experience and add a question at the end, just to fit the format of the advice show. But first, have a drink. And before my tale...
Cheers.
Skull. Back in October, I went to Viking Con in Copenhagen, the oldest annual gaming convention in Denmark. It was the first one was held back in 1982, and I have been a regular attendee since the 90s. I look forward to another great weekend spent gaming and hanging out with friends, and I was not disappointed. I did indeed meet people, and that I only ever see at Viking Con. But years of interaction create bonds, and there were talks about the games we played since last time, how last year's plans of moving had turned out for one guy, okay, but he still needs to find a good RPG group in his new home, and status of jobs and family. I had a chance to meet one of the kids from an after-school club I ran at 13 years. He is one of the youngest members of the gaming club. He brought his dad, himself a gamer, and it was nice to talk with them both. I also spent time with my oldest, age-wise friend. He turned 74 years old this weekend, and it was about among the first D&D players here in Denmark. And he's a part of my regular gaming group, which have played bi-weekly since the 90s, currently playing Pulp Cthulhu. Every Friday evening, I ended up playing a game of Vaesen with a fantastic group of players. One of them was my old friend, and the other two were players also named Thomas. Wow, 3 Thomases, 1 game. Never tried that before. I have 3 Michaels in my class this year.
Oh, yeah.
And they all have, Michael E, Michael C, and Michael G. Even the last, initial rhyme. It's very frustrating. Sorry, let's go back to the email. And by the strange coincidence, one of the other Thomases did remember me from back in the days when we were both members of the same gaming club. Then, again, sometime in the 90s, he was a kid of about 13 to 14 years and had been one of the older members, and I had been one of the older members, being in my early 20s then. After the game, we had time to share old memories. Anyways, the Vaesen games were fantastic. A murder mystery set in 1870s Roskilde? I did not say that right. An old historic town with a very well-paced investigation into the occult. The clues led us into a handful of very well-made handouts, and there were some very nice audio files the GM played for us. When we heard the voices of the fairies in the wind, or when we did a ritual to speak with the murder victim, creepy and cool.
Awesome.
It was a great game, and the author of the scenario was very kindly shared his work. So now I hope to play the adventure again with my wife and some friends during the coming holidays. I should note that my only experience with Vaesen before the game was the Happy Jack's London Calling actual play that made me fall in love with the game before I even tried it. Saturday I had signed up to play another one of my favorite games, Warhammer Fantasy Role-Playing, or WFRP for short. Pronounced Wurfrup.
Woofrup.
Wurfrup. Okay.
Woof-rup.
Wurfrup. 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 Okay. By another coincidence, I ended up with the other Thomas from the day before as the GM. It was
Thomas from the Woof-rup game.
Yeah. Wurfrup Thomas. It was an action-packed murder mystery. And this Thomas did agree upon afterwards, a bit to my side plots, because the evil chaos cult, where there were a rogue and the very evil Witcher hunter, Skavs, beastman, and large demon to keep track of. Compared to the Vaesen game, it was obvious that less is often more. But
He basically included every single evil faction in Warhammer Fantasy RPG.
That's a lot in one game. I'm not a Warhammer person, but just from watching Henry Cavill videos, I know that that's a lot.
I can learn you sometime, Kimmy.
Does Henry wear a shirt in these videos?
Yeah. But it's okay.
He talks, though, which is a very similar experience.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
This is my biggest motivation
Drool a little bit. Okay.
for learning about Warhammer is that Henry Cavill might meet me someday, and it would make him talk to me longer. Okay. But it was still a great game, and fun was had by all. Both games will absolutely be fond memories, and perhaps the foundation for new and renewed friendships. The rest of the con, I played board games, which was fun, but not the topic of this fine show. All in all, it was a great con, and compared to last year where masks and hand sanitizer was everywhere, it was great to be able to enjoy the convention without having such worries this year. Take a drink before the question. Skål! So I do want to pause for just a second. It's very interesting, having gone to Strategicon for as many years as we have now.
Mm-hmm.
I've been going, I think, for over 10 years now. It is interesting. You have convention friends. I have a whole bunch of people who are super good friends at conventions, and I never see them any other point. And it's just like, and you playing games together, and you're like hang out, and you have lunch at the same time, and all these things.
Yeah.
And like people besides like Happy Jacks people.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's just very interesting how those events, and it's same thing with Comic Cons. Like I have a bunch of cosplay friends that we chat on Facebook or whatever social media, and then we hang out at conventions, and we all get lunch together. We do all the things. We never hang out outside of that.
Yeah.
And we should. Like it makes no sense. Most of them live within like a reasonable distance of drive.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting how you have these distilled moments at these nerd gathering events. It's interesting.
Gene and Hot Rob live like 4 minutes from my house.
Yes.
Like, and I only ever see them twice a year down by the airport.
Yeah.
An hour and a half away from all of us.
Either of you, yeah.
It's like, we are right around the corner for each other. Why are we not playing more beer?
Yeah.
Or playing more games? Sorry, I just read Snort Beer with that.
¿Por qué no los dos?
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
All right.
Also, I would like to offer, you're on WFRP in Copenhagen.
Thank
you. Been holding
All right.
that in.
And finally, the long-awaited question. Personally, I find it a very delicate balance to make a great mystery and investigation adventures. As a player, I like to work in a bit for clues, and I don't like it when finding clues seems to happen automatically. I often prefer clues that to be very straightforward, but also raise dilemmas about what to do. And it is okay with a bit of red herrings and misleading clues. It wants to work for it. And now for the hosts. When creating a murder mystery or other investigation, how do you prefer the balance between having to figure things out as players versus getting things served on behalf of the character's skills and dice rolls? Best regards, Thomas from Denmark. So I picked this because it's sort of linked with kind of the first email.
Yeah.
But it's different in a way because it's not about the GM planning these things.
Right.
It's about, like, how much do you want the players to, struggle and, like, do things in character to find things versus just being, like, role perception.
Yeah, yeah. And
even
go
then,
ahead.
you can end up just giving away more information. So,
Right.
full disclaimer, I'm bad at this kind of game. I have run precisely one, and it was a one-shot, and we ended up being pressed for time, and I basically felt like I was just explaining the mystery to them.
Right.
I was like, yeah, so you find this, and then you find this, and this is what this means. I'm just like,
Yeah.
my style of GMing and mysteries don't go super well together, at least like in a short condensed period.
Yeah, big same, my girl. Big same.
Yeah.
I'm like,
so I was like, oh, I will hope everyone else explains how to do this because I'm bad at it.
Right.
Yeah. Do you have anything, Adam?
Yeah, I have. I feel very much the same way. I have a hard time running mystery games for that very reason, and very much tied into the previous question, because like I said, when I'm running games, I try not to know what's going on. Well, that really is not good for a mystery writer. Several years ago, when I was really trying hard to do a lot of screenplays, and I had this wonderful idea for like a mystery series, a detective series, and I'm like, oh God, this sucks. I don't even know how to construct a mystery. I'm like, I have this incredible world and all these great characters, but I have no idea how to write a mystery story or how to make it happen. So, and I started looking into that more, and it's still just like, it just doesn't click with me. Like, I do not understand. I also don't read a lot of mystery books. So, or watch mystery shows. I tend to not really get into those kinds of stories in general. So, to me, that's kind of a good sign that, that's a kind of it's a sign that this is not for me, right? So I think like I hear from, a lot of writers will say, like, what really matters is who you're reading, right? You learn more from reading other people's writing than you do from doing your own writing. And I think, I think this is one of those things where if you're not in the habit of consuming these kinds of stories that are based in mystery, then, you're at a disadvantage for running them. And that's one of the reasons so when I started trying to GM an L5R game, I wanted to do the modules because, like I said, the modules are really beautifully written. They're fun to just read as a reading experience. But I could not keep my mind wrapped around how to deliver this information in such a way that was not leading them too obviously to where it was going. Right.
Yeah,
And
I have that same problem. So, I am neurodivergent, and I run games for like 25 to sometimes 50-50 split of neurotypical and neurodivergent people.
Mhm.
And the great thing about being neurodivergent is that doesn't even mean that other neurodivergent people are similarly neurodivergent.
Right. Yeah.
So what seems obvious to me very often is just absolutely obtuse to everyone
Oh
else.
yeah.
Yeah.
In the meantime, my girlfriend had to kiss me to convince me that she liked me, aka being hit with a clue by 4.
Right. Yeah.
So like this is something I really struggle with. So people who run mystery games, please write in. I've heard really good things
Yeah.
about Gumshoe. That's a system I really want to learn someday. So like if you have ever run a mystery game successfully or unsuccessfully, write in, tell us your experience, because we've got no clue.
Yeah.
Kimmy, how about you?
Yes. I've run a couple. My trick with it, and it doesn't work for everyone, is probably very similar to Adam, where you kind of keep it malleable. So generally what I do is I place, and it's kind of the same thing you do for any RPG. I find, you place problems in front of them, and I don't come up with solutions.
Yeah.
And I find that works. It's not that different from running other things. I find a lot of it is the tone and vibe you set
Uh-huh.
more than actually like it being a lot different from other types of games.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so you're in this room, and I might have a list of different like clues that are in the room, and they're gonna look for them. These are things, but if they ask something that makes sense, like,
Yeah.
oh hey, yeah, that's in the room too.
Uh-huh.
And I generally start. These are the type of games that while I do improv them, I generally have the ending. Like I have a couple like options to slot into.
Yeah.
Kind of like what we were just saying about
Right.
like video games.
Mhm.
So, because if you really think about it, most RPGs, and it says it in the email, like are sort of mysteries. It's like, oh, someone's been attacking the town. They have to figure out who it is.
Right. Yeah.
So it's the same strategies you'd use. You just have it in like a small room with blood on the wall.
Yeah.
And you just kind of are like, okay, so you walk in this hazy room, and it's more in your description of it that makes it feel noir mystery or whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
With these, I need to have an end point so that I can make sure all the clues are pointing in that direction. A little bit more so than in like a fantasy campaign where they just are trying to figure out who's, murdered the tavern keeper or whatever, because people who are playing this type of game are in that mindset of, I need to solve this crime. So you need to make sure things line up a little bit better. There's not quite as much wiggle room. So generally I'll have like, okay, these are the 3 possible evildoers. And then I'll just make sure that the clues I'm giving point in a certain direction. And then if the players are like, okay, I'm going to look and see, okay, we have some blood spatter. I'm going to test it and see, what does it say about the person in my fancy gizmo? Because I watched too much CSI, and obviously it gives me the hair color of the person whose blood it is, right? And so that then will then narrow it down as they figure out clues. That it will point to the whoever, like,
Yeah.
whoever is not disqualified, but by the clues they've come up with, ends up being
Right.
the bad guy.
Oh, yeah.
Or bad girl, or bad person, whatever
yeah,
they are.
yeah.
The evildoer. So that's generally how I run it.
Yeah. I think one of the keys here is to you don't want to, if you're going to have a mystery, right? The real excitement is solving the mystery. So you don't want to set it up in such a way that the players are not going to get that, right? And so I had this one experience that was just awful, where we were playing a game, and we were playing for several weeks, and we spent hours in like multiple sessions going through this town, and we thought we were looking for a changeling who had been responsible for like creating a dead magic zone. And it turns out that had nothing to do with it. It was a theory that one of the players had come up with, and then the GM let us waste several sessions looking for this, and then we finally like find this changeling, and he's like, I didn't have anything to do with that. I'm just a merchant. And and it was like, we thought we were on to something. Why did you let us waste all that time?
Yeah.
And so I think, when you're going to have a mystery, you do need to keep in mind that at some point the players have to figure it out. Otherwise, it's not a fun story.
Right. Don't let them waste too much time on one thing. Like,
Yeah.
that's a cool theory. That player could brought it up, but in that same session, let them investigate it for a bit,
Right.
but then squash it so that they can move on to something
Right.
else. If you're not going to adopt it to make it the solution, then you need to make it like clear fairly quickly, not immediately, but definitely by the end of that session or at the beginning of the next one. Like, oh no, this isn't. Oh, have them find the changeling, or have them find a clue that shows like, oh no, there's werewolf hair here, or whatever.
Yeah,
because that's just so frustrating.
Yeah. And it's okay to send them on wild goose chases and red herrings and misleading things for a little while, but you want to ultimately get them back onto the main story, because that's where the excitement is.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, some of those things can be so exciting. Rose, I'm sorry. Do you have a thing to add? I keep.
Oh no,
Okay.
you're fine. You're
Okay.
fine.
Like think about like mystery movies. Like it's like, okay, they're there at the scene of the crime, and suddenly they see a shadowy figure, and then they do a chase scene, like where they're like, and then like, oh, that person gets away, but they found, oh, this lipstick tube, and then it's like, then they track down the dame, because it's always a dame in noir things, like who wears that color lipstick or whatever it is. So, and then it turns out, okay, she's a suspect for a while. Oh no, she, is, and so you can have all these things that where they're successful in investigating things, even if it's not the solution to the crime.
Right.
So have them track down a suspect who ends up, successfully, who ends up not being the person, but has information for them.
Yeah.
Don't, again, like we were saying, don't make anything a complete dead end.
Right.
Have everything point in another direction. And that makes it interesting, because they're succeeding and they're finding more information. So even if they're not solving the crime perfectly, they are failing forward.
Right.
Their success failing. I don't know how to say that. Think of a cute thing for that, because I'm too tired to do it. But basically, they're making successful advance in the plot and learning more things about the world.
Yeah.
Without necessarily, you don't have to like serve everything up on a platter.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Russ.
Give them information even if they don't solve the mystery. And the other thing is, rolling back to kind of like my core gaming values of, don't waste your players' time. Like, these are human beings sitting at the table. Their time matters. If you're going to have a red herring, have a cutoff point for it.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you're going to have an incorrect assumption, give them a way to figure out that it is incorrect before it goes on for multiple sessions or an hour or anything. Like, let them find that person who's a suspect but not the actual perpetrator quickly, so they can rule it out and then like use the information they gained and move on. That's really important.
Oh, one more thing. Watch Columbo. And the reason I bring that up is because if you watch Columbo movies, which I watched all of them multiple times because my mom was a huge fan.
Are they movies? I thought it was like a TV show.
Well, they did a TV show, but
Oh.
then they'd also do made-for-TV movies
Oh,
too.
okay.
So yeah, and those reran more often than the show.
That makes
So
sense.
that's what I usually saw.
Okay.
But whenever you see a Columbo TV episode or one of the movies, you'll notice the very first scene is usually the killing, the murder happening, and you know who did it. And you know the entire episode, who the killer was. And Columbo knows too, because Columbo's super smart. And Columbo figures it out in the very first interaction with that person. But the excitement of Columbo is watching him interrogate people to get people to incriminate themselves and to reveal all the information that locks it up tight. And that brings me to my final point about mysteries, which is that the real excitement is in how the clues come together and how everything gets solved. It's not the excitement is not the not knowing. The excitement is the discovery,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
It's not that you discover it, it's how you discover it.
Yeah, I've heard of some RPGs. I haven't played in one where like it works that exact same
Yeah.
way. Like the players, not even the players, the PCs know who did the crime.
Yeah.
But they need to prove it. And so like that can be really fun too because like then they have a little bit more wiggle room.
Right,
It's
yeah.
like you already know who did it, and then as they're kind of investigating to find a way to prove it to the king
Yeah.
or whatever, that can
Yeah.
be a super fun way to set that up too.
Yeah, I like to use roles to, like, if somebody fails their investigation role, it's not that they don't get the information they need. It's usually, for me, I make that mean that they've pissed somebody off, or they've made an enemy, or the killer's now aware of them, or or something. There's some sort of consequence that makes things more difficult for them. They still get the clue. It's just that it sometimes it's great to make them regret succeeding.
Yeah, there's complications.
Yeah.
Be really super careful about giving them wrong information.
Mhm.
Oh God, yes.
That can be
So-
frustrating.
Yeah.
So the trouble with running a mystery game is that if you're using a game that has strict pass-fail dice mechanics, it's the same. It's basically you're running a game of consecutive locked doors, and if they fail the first lockpick check,
Yeah.
they don't go through the door,
Uh-huh.
and then they go nowhere.
Yeah.
Right.
And basically, the progression of the game is, well, let's sit around and roll
Uh-huh.
until we pass the lockpick check,
Right.
and then we get to the next door,
Yeah.
and then we start rolling again.
Right.
Why would you
And-
ever do that? It's like, unless there's some magic thing about the door that attacks them back if they fail.
Right.
It's just, I don't understand. Yeah, no.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why, like, the idea of making a rogue roll to pick a lock when they're just like in front of a door and there's nothing else going on is like, yeah, don't make them roll for that,
Right.
because that's something in their skill set. Let them just do it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
When there is a consequence for that failed roll, then do that, because if the consequence is the story does not progress and we all sit here and do nothing,
Yeah.
it's a bad consequence.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
All right.
Jib. Oh, sorry. When I was like, Jib always
You
had
said that
really.
like 8 times.
I know. One more thing.
Okay,
I'm
okay,
Columbo.
Adam
Yeah.
Columbo.
Jib had always had really good advice about that. Like, we only roll when we disagree on the outcome.
Yes.
Right. And so if they need to go through the locked door, then they get through the locked door. It's what's on the other side. That's where the story is. Not that how long does it take them to sit there and pick the lock.
Yeah.
Or who finds you while
Or-
you're picking the lock.
Right. Yeah.
or-
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's where
exactly.
the fun is. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
You done? One more,
Yeah,
no more
I'm
things?
done.
No more things?
One more
Wait,
thing.
no, no.
Yeah.
I'll start making you buy me a beer every time you say
3-hour
one more
podcast.
thing.
3-hour podcast.
No. I have to practice combat. Okay. Mailbag number 3.
Dear High Empress Kimmy and her disposable cannon fodder.
What?
Called out I am. Delicate little wallflower who only enters the garden of the Happy Jacks Discord to post for games. I must redeem myself with the podcast currency known as content. First, to throw off my disguise of delicate by revealing, it is I, Steffi from Scotland, who have made Jason self-conscious on 2 separate accounts. First on his incredible Welsh accent, and then the expectations he set up for rule placements. I am cutthroat and vicious with my taunts. Sorry, Steffi. Nah, I'm not sorry. So I will continue my streak of picking on Jason with the most hideous weapon at my disposal. Compliments!
Oh,
He
that
does hate them.
definitely makes him uncomfortable.
At JackerCon, I took part in his playtest of Dragon Ranchers, a wonderful start which I see as a fantastic system. The mechanics are accessible yet not too simple. The lore is incredible. God, Jason is just cringing right now.
Yeah.
The customization of the dragons, although in early planning sessions, is inspiring. I played a noir detective werepanther with an adorable freak of a baby chimera that she was not ready to be a mother to. But trust me to go for the most non-dragon dragon available. I am such a rebel with my lurking in the Discord and whatnot. Second, I will lower my sass for just a moment to ask for your great wisdom. Masks, my game of choice, seem lacking GM advice videos on YouTube. An oversight in the natural order of things. And while I have very little interest of being a delicate wallflower with a vicious sneak attack of compliments, if someone doesn't make them, no one will. What advice do you have about giving advice? And now that I hopefully got what I came from and lured you into an illusion of security, I will attack and come for your queen.
Oh.
I am uncomfortable with tarot, but I have bought Decima, butcher it, and use it in my games. It is wonderful. For people who are iffy about tarot, get the PDF. You don't have to touch or use the cards and can make your games better. And with that, I bid you farewell. I must return to the shadows of the Happy Jacks Discord page, never to return until someone tags my name 3 times. Steffi in Scotland.
Very good.
Now, what is Decima?
What is
no
Decima?
Decima actually just got reordered. I put a bunch of money on a credit card.
Oh,
So we're having,
yeah.
so we'll have actual physical decks in 3 to 6 weeks, depending on printing and shipping
Oh,
time.
nice.
But I literally approved the new proofs today for their printing.
Yay.
So it's exciting,
Very cool.
stressful. I have a company that orders physical products. Okay.
Yay.
Yes. So, okay. So I have a lot of advice about this. Some of it will be maybe stuff you're not interested in. But first off, especially on YouTube, you need to have a vibe or a personality or something that
Or a
is
Scottish
unique to you.
accent will probably get you very far.
100%. Like, I would watch.
I was
going
going to say it worked for Jacksepticeye, but he's Irish.
I mean, it kind of applies. If you have a charming, cool accent, that's amazing.
There's
Valley
Ireland,
Girl doesn't
there's
do it.
Scotland, and there's the bloody sea.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry.
I would like to apologize to you. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, like having something like a cute little name, like I can't think of one right now, but like Gaming from Glasgow or something like that. Like whatever it is, like something. I love alliteration, but it doesn't have to be that. But like having like your little quirk where like people will remember that that's your thing. So for Happy Jacks, the thing I kind of aim for is like we're super real.
Yeah.
Like, I've cut down on the burping, but we're still, like, real friends who really hang out, who really game together, who talk about it and, like, give advice and sometimes learn from our own mistakes and share those mistakes. So I want the vibe to be, you know, real. Like, real players, real friends, real games.
An
not
actual gaming group that could exist in the
yeah,
world.
exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So that's kind of the vibe. And then also making it sort of like we're not while we are a business to sustain ourselves, not being like a for-profit business.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like partially for tax reasons, I don't want to deal with a bunch of all of that stuff. But it's like we break even. That's our plan. And like enough to survive and keep making real content. Because I believe it is incredibly important. Like the stuff Critical Role has done for the hobby has been absolutely helpful. Like all, high tides raise all ships and things like that. But I also think it is equally important that we have real games out there that people can watch that are of high enough like audio and video quality that people can really see it, but that there's real people in them and they're not, all voice actors, that it's not super highly produced, that it's, real GMs making it up as they go or whatever it is. So that's kind of the brand I've gone for Happy Jacks. So you need to come up with what your brand will be. So think about that. You probably already have some ideas about that. Make it real. Make it something that's really a part of yourself, and make it something that you're really passionate about. Because if you pick like a funny quirk thing or like a character to put on, you will then be stuck with that for all time. And that is hard and gets stressful and it makes you not want to make content. And making content is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, having acceptable, and it's easier to do now, video and audio quality is very important.
Yeah.
Splurge a little bit and get like a nice little intro. Canva is a website you can use for free online. It does really nice like promotional images and promotional videos, stuff like that. So you can check them out. And you can make little like videos and intro videos. They even have a free sampling of music you can use to do that, just so it's like a good production quality. Because that's really your advice isn't going to be what gets people to watch your videos to start with. It's going to be something that catches their eye in the production quality or the audio quality or things like that. That then once they watch it, they find your advice and then they keep coming back for the advice, hypothetically.
Yeah.
At least that's my theory. I don't know why people come back to us, but
yeah.
So,
We're pretty.
We're pretty. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't know that and this is just from my personal taste. I don't worry so much about production quality. But I also, like, I will admit, I have a very kind of flat ear, flat eye, flat taste buds kind of taste in things.
We've seen how you dress.
Right.
Oh.
Wow.
I love you, Adam.
Burn.
What is wrong with middle-aged lesbian librarian? I don't understand. No, what did I say? Art professor. Middle-aged lesbian art professor is my absolute vibe now. But no, I can't really tell the difference between like a $10 bottle of wine and a $100 bottle of wine. I really can't. And so
guess what you're getting for Christmas?
a $10 bottle of wine.
A $100 bottle of wine.
Wow, thanks,
Wink,
Kimmy.
wink.
And Joey will be like, "What is this garbage you bought at 7? It has a twist off cap, Adam."
Yeah. But yeah, so one of the things that I recently have started, because for a long time I've been trying to dabble in learning more Choctaw language, and so I will tell you this: when it comes to Choctaw language YouTube videos, there is no production quality available, and and you're taking what you can get. When it comes to gaming advice, you're going to have a lot more competition in terms of what people are going to see out there, and some people will be turned off by production quality. But I think the real as long as your production quality is acceptable, like if you're at a decent volume and it's not like really scratchy or noisy or whatever, it's okay if there's an occasional dog bark in the background or things like that. Don't get too obsessed with that to the point that you're not actually like creating content.
True, absolutely. Yeah. And the thing you need to know about most YouTube videos, unless there is a thing where people are actually watching it, a lot of people use it like podcasts. Yeah. Like a lot of people put it on in the background on their computer while they're doing other things. Yeah. So make sure, like, if you're using visual stuff, that's great. People will watch it. But a lot of times, if you're just describing things, which is absolutely a valid thing, you have to know that you don't necessarily need to worry too much about everything else. There's a ton of really great. There's a bunch of YouTube videos about how to make YouTube videos, and they're incredibly helpful, especially like not knowing like your tech background. Mm-hmm. I am tangentially in the industry. My partner is a professional and does this for a living, so I have a bit of a leg up with that. But do whatever is sustainable. Yeah. Content is king/queen/emperor-ish, like ruler of everything. So if you are so worried about, and I had to make this compromise because when I first took over the podcast, I was like, okay, I'm going to edit every episode, and I just realized that wasn't something that I would then sustain.
Yeah.
So I do like audio passes, I trim, and I add like bumpers on both ends.
Mhm.
But I mean, I have so many other things I'm trying to do. If I sat and waited till I could edit every episode, none of them would ever go out.
Yeah.
So you have to balance your perfectionism if you have that. Or your quality with what is sustainable and is still fun. So it's like one of those things where I was actually talking, I was like, now we're in winter, we're not running the AC. It makes my job so much faster and so much easier. So one of the things I want to eventually do is change our AC like setup here so that I don't have to worry about that noise anymore. Because I didn't realize how much time until I didn't have to do it anymore. I was spending processing the audio to pull out the AC noise. So find those little things that like will make it more sustainable over time. And the idea is to get it more streamlined as you go. So don't start with like 8 hours of production time for a single video, because then you're going to not make very many videos, and then no one will find your YouTube channel. Because unfortunately, like most things, YouTube is built on an algorithm. And the more you put out there, the more it makes people see your stuff.
Yeah.
Do we have advice about
right.
actually giving advice and not just about how to make videos?
So I actually have a couple of things.
Okay.
So being the resident, I don't know, I guess millennial,
Elder millennials.
elder millennial.
That's what we are. We are elder millennials.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
was
so
wondering if
being
I'd
the
have
more
to explain
junior
to you guys.
millennial.
Oh.
Oh, go ahead, Adam.
Oh, I was going to say, I earlier when 1982 was referenced, I was going to say, now 1982, Kimmy and Rose, was a time before you were born.
I mean, I know people who were born in 1982. I'm not one of them, but
So I was going to say, I have seen a lot of stuff on YouTube Shorts and on TikTok, which is short form videos.
Yeah.
I think masks would actually be a really great thing to cover in short form videos. You could go over every single playbook and just be like, this is what it does. This is stuff for this. Like, I would start with the stuff saying, here's how to get into masks. Because I think when someone is searching masks, they are trying to figure out how it works first. So I would start with a couple of like player facing things of like, how do I pick which playbook I want to play? And it'd be like, well, this is the bull. The bull does this really well. The bull does this really well. It has this opportunities for story arcs, stuff like that. Like hit the fun bullet points. Hit the superheroes that are similar to them, like things that people could connect them to.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. You don't have to have good audio or video production to make shorts or to be on TikTok. I have seen enough people take the microphone on their headphones and talk like this into a camera.
Oh, yeah.
So many times.
And they go viral.
It's because they're still enjoyable to watch.
Yeah.
Well,
like, I have my Blue Yeti right here, but for the first episode of Heaven on High, I was talking through this by accident.
Yeah.
And nobody complained.
No.
I felt my soul leaving my body when I realized I had used my $10 Skull Candy headphones instead of my expensive microphone for an entire session, but that's just me.
Yeah.
You can totally just get out there and talk into your phone. I would say make sure your volume level's good, make sure you're relatively well lit. Beyond that, like, you could do this with a brick phone.
Yeah. The production quality expectations for YouTube are higher than TikTok.
Yeah.
TikTok, like more than any other social media, is about content. Like, if you're not posting multiple times a day, like, almost nobody sees your stuff, which is why I burned out on TikTok after like a month of like being hardcore on it, because like I just could not sustain even like 2-second videos on there.
Yeah.
But it is I think you're right. It would be a great platform for having those short form videos if that's something that you're interested in, Steffi.
Yeah. And being able to... Oh, sorry.
The other thing is use your hashtags. Like, if somebody is like, how do I play masks? Like, if they're young, they're probably on TikTok. They'll probably look for masks. like we mentioned, there's not a lot of people talking about it. So that means even if they're old, even if there's not a lot of them, people will find them.
Yeah.
Same with YouTube. Like if you're just trying to make a resource for people to get into the best game in the world, which is Masks, fight me. Put it out there. It doesn't matter if it's new or if it's a consistent upload schedule or whatever. Like I have looked at Vampire the Masquerade stuff from like 10 years ago because it was on YouTube and I wanted to learn the lore because it's an interesting setting.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be concurrent stuff. It doesn't have to be constantly updated. You can just make it and put it out there. I would say like go through the playbooks and then go through like I would do maybe like an episode on each playbook. It could be maybe a 5-minute episode. It could be a single minute episode. And then I would do the same thing, but from the GM perspective of, so you have a bull in your game. This is how you push their buttons.
Yeah.
You know, this is how you mess with that type of character. This is how you make good story points around these kinds of characters. You know, the book, even if you just wanted to take what's written in the book and just regurgitate that, there are people out there who would find that helpful.
Absolutely.
Because some people like audio and visual process much better than they do read it.
Yeah.
So that would, you could do very bare minimum effort stuff that would still be a service to people. I would say keep it short, keep it sweet. Have bullet points rather than essays.
Yes.
If you want to talk about why the system's great, do your hour-long video essay. There is a niche for that on the internet. But if you're just trying to like run people through, it's like do a video on I'm a player. I'm trying to choose my playbook. How do I do that? Think through the use cases for people as they are coming to the system of how do I choose my thing? How do I choose my moves? You know, stuff like that. Or like do maybe a 5-minute episode on how to build your character. In Masks, it's really simple. It's all in the booklet. So
I think it would be helpful to kind of think of it specifically for Masks, but I think this would work for other games too. But think of it in terms of trees, because some people are going to come there for like, okay, what is this game about? Like, what's just the general? And then other people are going to come there and want to know, like, okay, what are all the rules? Can you please explain this rule to me? I've read it 12 times. I don't get it. Right. And some people are, so people are going to come for different reasons to get your advice. And so having sort of different sections of, or different types of videos where you kind of go into, like here's my playlist on rules. Here's my playlist on characters. Here's my playlist on PBTA in general, and being able to, to point.
You mean like talent trees? Was that for
the talent trees.
I'm like,
that's what I'm
I'm like, are you talking about like forest for the trees?
No, I'm
like,
talking about talent trees. Talent trees, family trees, that kind of
Okay, like branching out in different gotcha.
So in my mind, I'm seeing like a family tree, and like here's
when you did that this thing with your hands, I suddenly was like, oh, I get what you mean, because I thought you were going to be like, some people come and want to see the whole forest, and some people want to pay attention to individual trees, and then you didn't go there, and I was like, I don't know.
But that is the legitimate way to go.
Yeah,
but if I was going to be a tree, I'd do this, and then I'd start talking to you. I'm a tree. But think about breaking it up into like what are the goals and what are the different reasons somebody's going to come looking for you, and because if somebody search mass character creation, you want them to find your videos about creating characters, but then you want to be able to say like, oh, hey, and if you like my awesome Scottish accent and you want to learn about the rules of Mask, like go see this series of videos. And you could also integrate that with short videos like on TikTok and say like, here's my favorite character archetype in Masks, and this is why I love it. Go check out my YouTube channel, which has all kinds of things telling you all about the game.
Yes. One great place to start would be to make a list of everything you can think about people might want to look up. And
Yeah.
then start really like thinking from there, like what's a good game plan? Where should I start this journey of this massive list of stuff? And then just start on it. And you're
Yeah.
going to change it. Like, don't expect your first video to be like your last.
Yeah.
It will totally change up as you go.
Yeah.
All right. We definitely have to end. Steffi, you share
And
with
do-
us when you're done.
Do not discount the value you will get from your accent.
100%.
100%. Call it Scott explains it all or something like that. Like capitalize on the fact that Americans will love your Scottish accent.
Is there anything like Scottish that like also starts with an M? So it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't think. Something in masks or
Right. Masks and haggis. Which one's messier? I don't know. Like
don't do that.
no.
All right. All right. Oh, I turned my page already. Here we go. Thank you for joining us for season 31, episode 7. Please visit monkeyspawgames.com to support our amazing indie designer of the month, Nura Rose. Thank you to our chat mod, James V, and to our amazing Patreons who keep us ad-free and independent. If you'd like to join their amazing ranks, including getting a amazing free indie TTRPG each month from our indie designer of the month, you can join them at happyjacks.org/Patreon. And my name is Kimmy.
My name is Adam.
And I'm Rose.
And tonight we are going to leave you with a song. We're going to leave you with a song called Pass the Hat. And it's by Stu Venable. Who's that?
Ooh.
The
Stu.
net from his podcast, The Net Busker Folk Shop, spelled like shop a.
Shoppy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like ye
Folk
old
shoppy.
shop. And you can find that at netbusker.net. And I have no idea. I haven't heard any recent episodes. So I wonder if this is like a hobby that he did and then was like done with already. So, but we'll see. Anyway, we still have great music to play from it. Thank you all, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
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 Goodly folk, come gather around, hear the songs we sing. Drink an ale and we'll pass the hat. When we are drunk, joy to all we bring. The noble host of this place allowed us here to sing. So if our song do please your ear, then make the barkeep's bell ring. Goodly folk, come gather around, hear the songs we sing. Drink an ale and we'll pass the hat. When we are drunk, joy to all we bring. Our words may slur, but do be sure we need our tankards filled. For in this song our chords must be strong, so never a drop be spilled. Goodly folk, come gather around, hear the songs we sing. Drink an ale and we'll pass the hat. When we are drunk, joy to all we bring. Goodly folk, come gather around, hear the songs we sing. Drink an ale and we'll pass the hat. When we are drunk, joy to all we bring. And if our song offends your ear, we pray thee do have an ale. For we sound much better when your throat is wetter, and let our music prevail. Goodly folk, come gather around, hear the songs we sing. Drink an ale and we'll pass the hat. When we are drunk, joy to all we bring. Goodly folk, come gather around, hear the songs we sing. Drink an ale and we'll pass the hat. When we are drunk, joy to all we